Ryan Cooper had perfected the art of being nobody. For 3 years, he pushed his cleaning cart through the corridors of humanity's greatest achievement, the Galactic Council's flagship station, where 100 alien species gathered to keep the peace. And for 3 years, not a single one of them had really looked at him. That was exactly how he wanted it. The station stretched for miles in every direction, a gleaming monument to interstellar cooperation. Diplomats from worlds Ryan had never visited walked these halls every day, speaking languages he'd never learned, making decisions that affected billions of lives. And Ryan? He mopped their floors. He emptied their trash. He wiped down their conference tables after they left. He was furniture. Background noise. Invisible. On this particular morning, Ryan moved through his routine with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown for 1,000 mornings before. His gray maintenance uniform was crisp and clean. His cart squeaked slightly as he pushed it. He could have fixed that squeak months ago, but the sound made him seem more harmless, more ordinary. His face showed nothing but polite neutrality as alien beings twice his size brushed past him without a glance. The other human staff on the station treated him the same way. They knew Ryan as the quiet guy who kept to himself, who never complained, who always showed up on time and did his job without fuss. Sometimes they'd nod hello. Sometimes they wouldn't. Ryan never seemed to mind either way. But today was different. Today, tension crackled through the station like electricity before a storm. The Kryloth Empire was here to negotiate. Ryan had heard the whispers in every corridor, seen the worried looks on every face. The Kryloth were a warrior species, tall, powerful beings with 4 arms and eyes that could see in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. Their empire stretched across a dozen star systems, and their military might was legendary. 4 months now they'd been pushing at human borders, testing defenses, making demands. Today's negotiation was supposed to prevent a war. Ryan doubted it would. He guided his cart toward the main diplomatic chamber, timing his arrival perfectly. The session was already underway, which meant security wouldn't pay much attention to him entering. They never did. To them he was just the janitor coming to tidy up. The chamber was massive, built to accommodate species of all sizes. Towering windows looked out onto the stars beyond. A circular table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by delegates from across known space. But all eyes were on the 2 groups facing each other across that table. On one side sat the human diplomatic team, 5 men and women in formal attire, looking tired and increasingly desperate. Ryan recognized Ambassador Patricia Hayes at the center, a career diplomat who'd spent her whole life trying to build bridges between species. On the other side sat the Kryloth delegation, led by General Vexthor. The general was an imposing figure even by Kryloth standards. His dark exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights. His 4 arms moved with controlled precision, each gesture calculated to demonstrate power. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder, translated into perfect English by the station systems. "Your species will surrender control of the Outer Rim territories," Vexthor declared. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a demand. It was a statement of fact, as if human compliance was already certain. "You will withdraw all military presence from the border systems. You will grant Kryloth vessels unrestricted access through your trade routes." Ambassador Hayes tried to maintain her composure. "General, we've explained repeatedly that those terms are impossible. The Outer Rim territories are home to millions of human colonists. We can't simply. Then those colonists will become subjects of the Kryloth Empire," Vexthor interrupted. "This is our final offer. You have 24 hours to accept." Ryan pushed his cart along the wall of the chamber, moving slowly, methodically. He collected a discarded water bottle here, straightened a chair there. To anyone watching, he was just doing his job, barely worth noticing. But he was listening to every word. "General, please," Hayes said, and Ryan could hear the strain in her voice. "What you're asking for would leave our colonies defenseless. Surely we can find a middle ground." Vexthor stood abruptly, his 4 arms spreading wide in a gesture of contempt. "Humanity speaks of defense when you should speak of surrender. Your species is soft. Weak. You negotiate when you should kneel." One of his hands swept across the table dismissively, knocking over a waste container. Trash scattered across the pristine floor, plastic cups, paper documents, electronic tablets clattering on the polished surface. The general looked directly at Ryan for the first time. His eyes held nothing but disdain. "You," Vexthor said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Clean this. Now." Every delegate in the room fell silent. Some looked uncomfortable. Others simply waited. This was power being demonstrated in its rawest form. A general forcing a human to crawl on the floor while discussing humanity's surrender. Ryan said nothing. He simply nodded politely the way a good janitor should. He set aside his mop and walked forward, kneeling down to gather the scattered items. His movements were careful, methodical. One piece of trash at a time. He was in no hurry. Beside him, the negotiation continued, voices rising and falling above his head as he worked. As Ryan reached for a fallen tablet near the general's feet, his sleeve rode up slightly on his left forearm. It was only for a moment. Just a few seconds of exposed skin. But it was enough. Near the door, a young Kryloth officer named Lieutenant Corval had been standing at attention, barely listening to the familiar rhetoric of the negotiation. He'd heard it all before, the demands, the threats, the human attempts at compromise that never worked. His eyes had drifted to the human janitor on the floor, just another part of the background. Then he saw the tattoo. Corval's breath caught in his throat. His four eyes widened. His hand instinctively moved toward the weapon at his side before he caught himself. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The tattoo was intricate, covering most of the human's forearm in patterns of black and deep crimson. The design was distinctive, interweaving lines that formed a specific pattern, a pattern Corval had studied in military academy, a pattern that appeared in classified files and whispered stories. The mark of the siege breaker. Every Kryloth officer knew that mark. It haunted their military history, appeared in their cautionary tales, symbolized their greatest defeat. 15 years ago, the Kryloth Empire had laid siege to a human colony world called Redemption Point. For 6 months they bombarded it mercilessly, certain of victory. Then, in one impossible night, everything had fallen apart. One human soldier had infiltrated their command fleet and systematically destroyed it from within. Thousands of Kryloth warriors dead. Dozens of warships crippled or destroyed. An entire battle fleet brought to its knees by one man. The siege breaker. Kryloth High Command had never released the full details. They'd classified everything, buried the reports, tried to erase the shame. But soldiers talked. Stories spread. And that tattoo, that specific mark, became legend. The soldier who earned it had died at Redemption Point, according to official records. Killed in the final assault on the command ship. But Ryan Cooper had just straightened up, his sleeve falling back into place, covering the mark. His expression remained unchanged, polite, neutral, forgettable. He gathered the last of the trash, placed it carefully in his collection bin, and stepped back against the wall. Corval's hands trembled. His mind raced. He tried to speak, to warn his general, but his voice wouldn't come. "General," he finally managed, his words barely a whisper. That human, his arm. But Vexthor wasn't listening. The general had already turned back to Ambassador Hayes, launching into another tirade about human weakness and Kryloth strength. And Ryan Cooper stood against the wall, holding his cleaning supplies, looking like nothing more than a tired janitor counting the hours until his shift ended. But Corval knew better now. He stared at that ordinary-looking human in the gray uniform, and all he could think was one impossible thought. The siege breaker was alive. And he was here. Lieutenant Corval couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that tattoo burned into his mind, those intricate patterns of black and crimson that decorated the janitor's forearm. He'd spent the entire night in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince himself he'd been mistaken. But he knew he hadn't been. By morning, exhaustion made his movements sluggish as he reported for duty. The other Kryloth officers noticed his distraction but said nothing. They had their own concerns. General Vexthor had given humanity 24 hours to accept his demands, and the countdown was ticking away. Corval found himself searching for the human janitor throughout the morning shift. He needed another look, needed to confirm what he'd seen. But Ryan Cooper seemed to have vanished into the station's endless corridors. During his lunch break, Corval retreated to the station's archives. His security clearance gave him access to military records, though many files about the war remained heavily classified. He pulled up everything he could find about Redemption Point. The official story was simple enough. 15 years ago, Kryloth forces had surrounded the human colony world. The siege lasted 6 months. Then, unexpectedly, the Kryloth fleet withdrew after suffering catastrophic losses. The records listed it as a strategic repositioning, a tactical adjustment. But Corval had heard the real stories in the academy, whispered tales that instructors pretended not to know, legends that spread through the barracks late at night. One human soldier. That's what the stories claimed. One man who'd somehow infiltrated the command carrier and brought down an entire battle fleet from the inside. They called him the siege breaker, and his legend had grown with each retelling until it seemed impossible, like something from ancient mythology. Corval dug deeper into the classified sections, using every access code he possessed. Most of the detailed reports had been redacted, blacked out line after line. But fragments remained. Incident reports that mentioned intruder without further explanation. Casualty lists that didn't match official numbers. Security footage marked as corrupted or missing. And then he found it, a single document that had somehow escaped complete redaction. A personnel file, mostly blacked out but with one name visible before it cut off. Captain Ryan Cooper. Terran Special Operations. Status, killed in action. Redemption point. 15 years ago. Corval's hands shook as he closed the file. The man was supposed to be dead. Every record said he died during the final assault on the command ship. So either someone had faked those records or the man pushing a cleaning cart through these corridors wasn't who everyone thought he was. The lieutenant forced himself through the rest of his shift, but his mind wasn't on his duties. He watched the station differently now, looking past the obvious. And once he started looking, patterns emerged that made his stomach turn cold. The human support staff. He'd never paid much attention to them before. Why would he? They were janitors, technicians, food service workers. They existed in the background, doing the menial work that kept the station running. But now Corval noticed how they moved. Every human maintenance worker on the station carried themselves with the same efficiency Ryan did. They never wasted motion. They positioned themselves with clear sight lines to exits and entrances. They communicated in brief exchanges that seemed casual but had an almost military precision. In the cafeteria, Corval watched a human woman serving food. She exchanged a few quiet words with Ryan as he passed through the line. "Kitchen's running smoothly," she said with a smile. "We'll have everything ready for tonight's reception." Her tone was casual, but her eyes scanned the room constantly, tracking movement, cataloging faces. Later, in one of the engineering sections, Corval observed Ryan speaking with a human technician who was supposedly checking power couplings. "System stable," the tech said. "Might see some fluctuations during the night shift though. Nothing to worry about." The words sounded innocent, but the way he said them, like a status report, like coded communication. How many were there? Corval tried to count the human support staff he'd seen over the past few days. 20? 30? More? All of them moving through the station like ghosts, cleaning and repairing and serving food, while the real powers of the galaxy conducted their important business. What if they weren't just support staff? What if humanity had embedded an entire military unit in the heart of the Galactic Council's most secure facility? The realization hit Corval like a physical blow. While General Vexthor made his demands and threatened military action, while the Kryloth Empire positioned its fleets and prepared for war, the humans had already won a different kind of battle. They were already inside. Already in position. That evening, Corval's worst fears were confirmed. He'd been assigned to security detail outside the general's private quarters. It was supposed to be a simple posting. Stand guard, look intimidating, make sure no one interrupted the general's private communications. But the walls in the station weren't as soundproof as people assumed, and Corval's hearing was excellent. General Vexthor was speaking with someone via encrypted channel. Corval couldn't see who, but he could hear his general's side of the conversation clearly. "The humans will reject our terms," Vexthor was saying, his voice carrying that tone of absolute certainty. "They always do. They'll waste the full 24 hours debating and hand-wringing and then they'll refuse. That's when we strike." A pause as the other party responded. "All fleets are in position," the general continued. "We won't just take the border systems. We'll strike at Earth itself. One devastating blow to their homeworld, and humanity will surrender everything." Corval felt ice spread through his veins. This wasn't negotiation. It never had been. The impossible demands, the aggressive posturing, it was all theater. General Vexthor had already decided on war. He'd already positioned the fleets. He was just waiting for an excuse to attack. Civilian casualties? Vexthor's voice held dark amusement. "That's the point, Commander. Terror is the most effective weapon. After Earth burns, every human colony will beg to surrender." Corval backed away from the door slowly, carefully, his mind reeling. He had to report this. Had to tell someone. But who? His superior officers all answered to Vexthor. The general commanded absolute loyalty from his staff. He turned to head down the corridor and nearly walked straight into Ryan Cooper. The human stood there in his maintenance uniform, holding a mop in one hand. But he wasn't standing like a janitor anymore. His posture was different, balanced, ready, alert. His eyes met Corval's with complete awareness. "You heard that, didn't you?" Ryan said quietly. It wasn't really a question. Corval's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. "Stay back, human. I don't know who you are, but—" "Yes, you do." Ryan's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You saw my tattoo yesterday. You spent today researching Redemption Point. You know exactly who I am." The lieutenant's 4 eyes darted around, checking for witnesses. The corridor was empty. They were alone. "You're supposed to be dead," Corval whispered. "I was supposed to be a lot of things." Ryan shifted his weight slightly, and Corval noticed how the human positioned himself between the lieutenant and the nearest exit. Not threatening, just aware. "I was supposed to stay retired. I was supposed to spend the rest of my life trying to forget what I did at Redemption Point. But then your general started planning another war and someone had to stop it. You've been spying on us. Infiltrating this station. This is an act of war." "What your general just described is an act of genocide," Ryan interrupted, his voice hardening. "We've been monitoring his communications for 3 months. We know about the fleet positions. We know about the planned strikes on civilian targets. We know everything." Corval felt torn between duty and horror. "If you know about this, why haven't you reported it to the Galactic Council? Why the secrecy?" "Because we need proof that will hold up under scrutiny. And we need someone from inside your delegation who's willing to verify it." Ryan's eyes bore into him. "Someone who just heard his general planning to murder billions of people. I can't betray my own species." "I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm asking you to save them." Ryan took a small step forward. "Do you know what the worst part of Redemption Point was, Lieutenant? After it was over, I walked through your ships. Saw the bodies of soldiers who were just following orders. Read letters from their families. They weren't monsters. They were just people serving under bad leadership." He rolled up his sleeve slowly, deliberately, revealing the full tattoo. In the corridor's harsh lighting, Corval could see details he'd missed before. The black patterns were obvious, symbols of destruction, of ships destroyed, of lives ended. But woven between them were threads of deep crimson, dozens of them, connecting the dark marks in an intricate web. "Everyone sees the black," Ryan said softly. "No one notices the red. Those crimson threads represent every enemy soldier we spared at Redemption Point. Every crew we evacuated before destroying their ships. Every wounded warrior we treated instead of finishing off. We killed when we had to, but we saved everyone we could." He met Corval's eyes directly. "Your general is planning to kill billions. Men, women, children, he doesn't care. He wants terror and ashes. And right now, you're the only person in his delegation who knows the truth and might actually care." Corval stared at the tattoo, at this human who should have been a ghost from history books. "What are you going to do?" Ryan's expression was unreadable. "I'm going to give people a choice between peace and learning why I earned this tattoo. But I can't do it alone. I need someone brave enough to stand up to a general." The lieutenant's mind raced. Everything he'd been taught said to report this, to alert security, to protect Kryloth interests. But everything he'd heard tonight told him his general was planning mass murder. "What?" Corval's voice cracked. He steadied himself. "What do you need me to do?" Ryan's expression softened slightly. It was the first genuine emotion the lieutenant had seen from him. "Tomorrow, during the emergency council session. Just be ready to tell the truth when it matters most." Corval spent a sleepless night wrestling with his conscience. By dawn he'd made his decision, not because it was easy but because it was right. When he reported for duty, everything looked different to him now. The station that had seemed so secure suddenly felt like a stage where a hidden drama was unfolding right under everyone's noses. He started watching the human staff with new awareness, and what he saw made his blood run cold. In the main concourse, a human cargo handler named Mitchell guided shipments through customs with practiced efficiency. But Corval noticed how Mitchell's eyes tracked every security patrol, how he positioned cargo containers to create natural cover points, how his routes always took him past critical junction points in the station's layout. This wasn't a man moving boxes. This was a soldier controlling terrain. At the central power distribution hub, a maintenance worker called Brooks ran diagnostics on the environmental systems. To anyone watching, he was just doing routine checks. But Corval saw how Brooks had access to every vital system on the station. Life support, communications, emergency protocols. One person with that much access wasn't standard procedure. It was strategic placement. In the commissary, a woman named Angela prepared meals for the diplomatic staff. She smiled warmly at everyone, remembered their preferences, made pleasant small talk. But Corval watched her hands move with military precision, watched how she cataloged faces and conversations, watched how she tracked the comings and goings of every important person on the station. They were everywhere. Humans in gray uniforms and work clothes, doing jobs that made them invisible, forgettable, beneath notice. But they moved like a coordinated unit. They were always in the right place at the right time. They had access to everything that mattered. The Galactic Council's flagship station, humanity's greatest achievement in diplomatic cooperation, wasn't just a neutral meeting ground. It was a trap waiting to be sprung. Corval found himself following Ryan through his daily rounds, staying far enough back to avoid notice. What he witnessed was a masterclass in covert operations disguised as janitorial work. Ryan pushed his cart into the diplomatic archives, nodding politely to the Kryloth guard at the door. Inside he emptied waste bins, wiped down terminals and cleaned the floors. But Corval noticed the small data chip that appeared in Ryan's hand for just a moment before disappearing into his uniform pocket. He was downloading files while pretending to dust computer stations. In the communications center, Ryan exchanged brief words with Angela, who'd brought lunch for the technicians on duty. "Turkey sandwiches today," she said cheerfully. "Made them fresh this morning." "Sounds perfect," Ryan replied. "Temperature's just right in here, isn't it?" They parted ways after 3 seconds of conversation. To anyone listening, it was meaningless chit-chat. But Corval was learning to hear the real message underneath. Temperature meant security status. Fresh meant new intelligence. Perfect meant proceed as planned. Later that afternoon, Corval watched Ryan have a similarly brief exchange with Brooks near the power distribution center. "Those coolant lines holding up?" Ryan asked casually. "Running smooth," Brooks answered without looking up from his diagnostic panel. "Might see a minor fluctuation tonight around 0200 hours. Nothing serious. System will auto-correct within 90 seconds. "Good to know," Ryan said and moved on with his cart. Corval's hands trembled as he realized what he'd just heard. That wasn't maintenance talk. That was coordination. Tomorrow night at 0200 hours, something would happen to the station's power systems for exactly 90 seconds. Long enough for, what? Data uploads? Security bypass? System access? He needed proof. He needed to understand the full scope of what the humans had built here. That evening, using security codes he probably shouldn't have, Corval accessed the station's personnel database. He pulled up employment records for all human support staff over the past 5 years. The patterns made him physically ill. 27 human civilians had been hired for the station during that time. On paper, their backgrounds were impeccable, excellent work records, strong references, years of experience in their respective fields. But Corval noticed something odd. Almost all of them had joined within a 6-month window 3 years ago. They'd come from different companies, different planets, different backgrounds. But they'd all arrived around the same time. He dug deeper, pulling military service records. It took some creative searching. Human military databases weren't directly connected to civilian employment files. But he found enough fragments to paint a terrifying picture. Mitchell, the cargo handler, had served 12 years in Terran Marine logistics before his retirement. Brooks, the maintenance tech, had been an engineering specialist with the Terran Navy, decorated for his work keeping ships operational in combat conditions. Angela from the commissary had served 6 years in intelligence operations before disappearing from official records. One by one, Corval traced them. Not all had obvious military backgrounds. Some records were too clean, too perfect, which was suspicious in itself. But enough of them showed the pattern. These weren't random civilians taking station jobs. They were veterans, specialists, operators. And Ryan Cooper, supposedly killed in action 15 years ago, was leading them. The lieutenant's mind reeled with the implications. The humans hadn't just infiltrated the Galactic Council's most secure facility. They'd spent years building a network, placing people in every critical position. They had access to communications, power, life support, security systems, diplomatic archives, cargo manifests. Everything. If they wanted to, they could shut down the entire station with a few keystrokes. But they hadn't. For 3 years, they'd done nothing but clean floors and serve food and fix broken equipment. What were they waiting for? The answer hit him like a thunderbolt. They were waiting for exactly this moment. They'd been watching, listening, gathering intelligence. They knew about General Vexthor's plans before Corval did. They'd probably known for months. This wasn't about attacking the station. It was about preventing a war. Corval found Ryan that night in an auxiliary storage area, far from the main corridors. The janitor was alone, organizing cleaning supplies with meticulous care. He didn't look surprised when Corval appeared in the doorway. "You've been following me all day," Ryan said without turning around. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "How many?" Corval demanded. "How many of you are there?" Ryan finished stacking bottles of cleaning solution before answering. "Enough." "Enough for what? To take over the station? To hold us all hostage? To stop a war without firing a shot?" Ryan finally turned to face him. "We've been here for 3 years, Lieutenant. If we wanted to hurt anyone, we've had countless opportunities. But that's not why we came." "Then why? Why embed Special Forces operators as janitors and cooks?" Ryan's expression was tired, almost sad. "Because 15 years ago, I killed thousands of your people to save millions of mine. And I swore I'd never do that again if there was any other way." He gestured around the storage room. "This is the other way. Intelligence gathering. Quiet observation. Building leverage without violence." "Leverage for what?" "For tomorrow." Ryan's voice was steady, certain. "General Vexthor gave humanity 24 hours to surrender. That deadline expires at noon. When the human delegation refuses his terms, he's going to use that as justification to launch his attack. We both know that." Corval couldn't deny it. "So what's your plan? Expose him? The Council will call it human propaganda. Your infiltration of this station is illegal. It will undermine any evidence you present. That's why we need you." Ryan took a step closer. "Tomorrow, when we reveal what Vexthor is planning, the evidence will come from his own communications, his own fleet movements, his own orders. But it'll still be easier to dismiss if it's just humans making accusations. We need a Kryloth officer willing to verify the intelligence. Someone from inside the delegation who heard the truth firsthand. You're asking me to betray my general in front of the entire Galactic Council. I'm asking you to save your people from following a madman into genocide." Ryan's voice was intense, now urgent. "Do you know what happens if Vexthor launches his attack? Even if humanity loses, we'll fight back. Millions will die on both sides. And when it's over, the Kryloth Empire will be seen as aggressors, as war criminals. Your entire civilization will pay the price for one general's ambition." Corval wanted to argue, to find some flaw in the logic. But he couldn't. Everything Ryan said was true. "How?" the lieutenant asked quietly. "How will you expose him?" Ryan pulled out a small data chip, the same one Corval had seen him pocket earlier. "Tomorrow at noon, during the emergency council session, there's going to be a technical malfunction. Multiple systems will experience brief disruptions. In that chaos, this data will be uploaded to every screen on the station and broadcast across the council's entire network. 3 years of intelligence. Irrefutable proof of what your general is planning. And you want me to stand up in front of everyone and confirm it's real. I want you to do what's right even though it's hard." Ryan met his eyes directly. "I've spent 3 years mopping floors and cleaning toilets to avoid starting another war. Surely you can spend 3 minutes telling the truth to prevent one." Corval barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw 2 futures branching before him. In one he stayed silent and loyal to his general, watching as billions died in a war built on lies. In the other he spoke the truth and became a traitor to his own people. At least that's what they'd call him at first. When dawn came, he'd made his choice. His hands still shook as he dressed for duty, but his mind was clear. The final day of negotiations began with false calm. The station hummed with its usual activity, aliens from 100 worlds going about their business, unaware that everything was about to change. General Vexthor strode through the corridors with absolute confidence, his 4 arms swinging in that distinctive Kryloth gesture of dominance. He nodded to his officers, including Corval, with the satisfaction of someone who believed victory was already assured. Corval fell into step behind his general, watching the human staff as they passed. Ryan was there, mopping a corridor near the diplomatic chambers. Angela pushed a cart of breakfast items toward the commissary. Brooks worked on a wall panel, his tools spread across the floor. Mitchell moved cargo containers in a side corridor. They all looked so ordinary. So harmless. But Corval knew better now. These weren't civilians, they were soldiers on a battlefield no one else could see. At 1100 hours, the emergency council session was called. Representatives from every major species filed into the grand chamber. The towering giants of Orion, the floating mist people of Kepler, the insectoid hive queens, the crystalline singers. Humans and Kryloth took their positions on opposite sides of the chamber, the air between them crackling with tension. Ambassador Patricia Hayes led the human delegation. She looked exhausted, like someone who'd spent the night preparing for a battle she knew she'd lose. General Vex Thor looked triumphant, already savoring his victory. Corval took his position along the wall with the other junior officers. From this vantage point he could see the entire chamber. He spotted Ryan in the far corner, standing quietly with his cleaning cart. Their eyes met briefly across the vast room. The session began with formal protocols, the reading of proposals, the statement of positions. Everyone knew it was theater. The real moment would come when the deadline hit at noon and the humans officially rejected Vex Thor's demands. At 1145 hours, Corval noticed the human staff moving. Not obviously, nothing that would draw attention. But Angela slipped into the chamber with a tray of water glasses for the delegates. Brooks appeared near the main power junction, supposedly checking a faulty circuit. Mitchell positioned himself by the emergency exits, ostensibly waiting to move some equipment. They were getting into position. At 1150 hours, Ambassador Hayes stood to give humanity's response. Her voice was steady despite the weight of what she carried. General Vex Thor, the Terran Coalition has carefully considered your proposals. While we genuinely desire peace between our peoples, we cannot accept terms that would leave millions of our citizens defenseless. We propose instead. Enough. Vex Thor's voice boomed across the chamber. He rose to his full imposing height. I did not come here to listen to more human excuses. Your time is up. Your answer is no, and that is all I needed to hear. He turned to address the entire council, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture of righteous anger. Let the record show that humanity has rejected peace. Let all witnesses note that the Kryloth Empire offered generous terms and was refused. What happens next is on human hands, not ours. General, please, Hayes tried to interrupt, but Vex Thor spoke over her. The Kryloth Empire will take what was offered and refused. Our fleets are all ready. The lights flickered. It was subtle at first, just a brief dimming that could have been anything. But then the environmental systems began chiming warnings. Ventilation fans spun down. Temperature controls beeped errors. All across the station, technical systems that had run flawlessly for years suddenly started experiencing simultaneous malfunctions. The chamber erupted in confusion. Delegates rose from their seats, voices rising in concern. Security officers rushed to their posts. Station administrators appeared in the doorways, speaking urgently into communicators. Please remain calm, a station-wide announcement declared. We are experiencing technical difficulties. This is not an emergency. All personnel should proceed to designated safe areas as a precaution. But Corval noticed that while most systems were failing, others worked perfectly. The main display screens remained active. The communication network stayed online. The broadcast systems continued functioning. Only the systems that controlled comfort and convenience had failed. Nothing critical, nothing dangerous. Just enough to create chaos and trigger evacuation protocols. It was surgical. Precise. Exactly what you'd expect from people who'd spent 3 years learning every system on the station. In the confusion, Ryan moved. Not rushing, not drawing attention. Just a maintenance worker checking one of the wall panels near the main display screens. His hands worked quickly, connecting something to the station's network through an access port hidden behind a service panel. At 1200 hours exactly, every screen in the diplomatic chamber activated simultaneously. The noise in the room died as delegates turned to look at the walls, where data began scrolling across display after display. Fleet deployment orders. Communications logs. Supply manifests. Strategic planning documents. 3 years of intelligence, all marked with official Kryloth military codes and General Vex Thor's personal authorization. The evidence was devastating. Maps showed Kryloth battle fleets positioned not just near the disputed border systems, but along major human trade routes, near colony worlds, within striking distance of Earth itself. Communications revealed orders to target civilian infrastructure. Supply records showed weapons being stockpiled far beyond defensive needs. Strategic documents outlined a plan called First Strike Protocol, a coordinated assault designed to cripple humanity's ability to fight back before war was even officially declared. And there, in his own words from recorded communications, was General Vex Thor discussing acceptable civilian casualties, talking about terror as a weapon, ordering preparations to strike at Earth's major population centers. This is fabrication. Vex Thor roared, his voice shaking the chamber. Human lies. Propaganda. They have infiltrated this station illegally, violated every protocol. The codes are authentic, someone said quietly. Every eye in the chamber turned to Corval. The young lieutenant stepped forward from his position along the wall. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to keep walking until he stood in the center of the chamber where everyone could see him. "Lieutenant, return to your post immediately," Vexthor commanded. Corval ignored him. He addressed the council instead, his voice shaking but clear. "I am Lieutenant Corval of the Kryloth Imperial Guard. I have served under General Vexthor for 3 years. And I can verify that these documents are authentic." The chamber exploded in noise. Kryloth officers shouted in outrage. Other delegates demanded clarification. Vexthor moved toward Corval with fury in his eyes. But Corval kept talking, his voice growing stronger. "2 nights ago, I overheard the general in private communication with fleet commanders. He said the negotiations were just theater. He said humanity would reject his demands, and that would give him justification to attack. He discussed striking Earth directly, targeting civilians, using terror as a weapon." "Lies," Vexthor bellowed. "This traitor has been corrupted by human influence." "I wish it were lies," Corval interrupted, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "I wish my general was the honorable warrior I believed him to be. But these documents match everything I heard. Every fleet position, every strategic plan, every timeline." From across the chamber, Ryan stepped forward. No longer trying to be invisible, no longer pretending to be just a janitor. He walked with military bearing, and suddenly everyone could see what Corval had seen. This wasn't a maintenance worker. This was a soldier. "My name is Ryan Cooper," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. "Captain, Terran Special Operations. Retired." He paused, letting that sink in. 15 years ago, I fought at Redemption Point. I've killed more Kryloth warriors than anyone in this room, and that's something I've spent every day since trying to atone for." He gestured to the screens around them. 3 years ago, Terran intelligence learned that General Vexthor was planning another war. So I came out of retirement and I brought my team with us. We came to this station not as warriors but as janitors and cooks and technicians. We spent 3 years gathering this evidence, not to attack anyone, but to prevent the attack we knew was coming. Vexthor lunged toward Ryan. His guards hesitated, torn between following their general and what they just learned about him. In that moment of hesitation, several Kryloth officers, including ones Corval had served with, moved to intercept Vexthor instead. "Stand down, General," one of them said firmly. "You're done." Ryan didn't flinch, didn't move to defend himself. He just stood there, meeting Vexthor's furious gaze with calm eyes. "You could have killed us all," Vexthor spat. "You had access to everything. You could have sabotaged life support, opened airlocks, destroyed the station." "Yes," Ryan agreed quietly. "We could have. That's the point. We chose not to." He addressed the council now, his voice steady. "Humanity sent soldiers to scrub floors because we'd rather prevent a war than win one. We've proven we can infiltrate your most secure facilities. We've proven we have the capability for violence. But what we wanted to prove was that we'd choose peace instead, even when violence would be easier." The council chamber erupted into debates that would last for hours. But the outcome was already clear. General Vexthor was taken into custody. The Kryloth government, shocked by what had been revealed, immediately recalled their fleets and issued formal apologies. And in the chaos, Corval found himself standing next to Ryan. "Thank you," the human said quietly. "I didn't do it for you," Corval replied. "I did it because it was right. That's exactly why I knew you would." The hours following the revelation felt like living through an earthquake that wouldn't stop shaking. The Galactic Council chamber had transformed from a place of careful diplomacy into something closer to a courtroom, with General Vexthor at the center of the storm he'd created. Delegates from dozens of worlds demanded answers. The evidence kept scrolling across every screen. Months of communications, years of planning, proof of a conspiracy that reached far beyond just humanity. As council members dug through the data, they discovered their own species had been targets too. The Orion Giants found documents discussing their resource-rich colonies. The Mist People discovered intercepted trade routes. Even other Kryloth worlds not loyal to Vexthor's faction had been marked for compliance operations. Vexthor stood in the center of it all, his 4 arms restrained by his own officers now, still trying to shout down the accusations. "This is espionage. Human infiltration. They violated every treaty by placing military operatives on this station. And you violated every treaty by planning genocide." Ambassador Hayes cut him off, her exhaustion replaced by controlled fury. "You sat across from us for weeks, pretending to negotiate while your fleets moved into attack positions. You discussed acceptable civilian casualty numbers. You plan to strike at Earth cities where billions live. A Hive Queen delegate, her translucent wings reflecting the chamber lights, spoke in her species' clicking language. The translation came through clear and cold. General Vex Thor, your actions have endangered not just humanity, but the entire framework of interstellar law. You have made every negotiation suspect, every treaty questionable. The damage you've caused will take generations to repair. Corval watched it all from the side of the chamber, feeling disconnected from his own body. Other Kryloth officers kept glancing at him, some with gratitude, others with barely concealed hostility. He'd saved lives today, but he'd also destroyed his career. He'd never serve in the Imperial Guard again. His family name would carry the stain of his choice forever. But when he looked at Ryan Cooper standing calmly near the wall, back in his janitor's uniform but no longer invisible, Corval knew he'd do it all again. The Council security force took General Vex Thor into custody by 1400 hours. His protests echoed through the corridors as they led him away. The Kryloth delegation fell into chaos, some demanding his release, others calling for immediate trials, everyone trying to distance themselves from decisions they'd supported just hours earlier. By 1500 hours, the Kryloth Empire's civilian government had issued an emergency statement. They condemned Vex Thor's actions, recalled all military fleets and promised full cooperation with Galactic Council investigations. It was damage control, political survival, but it was also genuine shock. Most Kryloth citizens had no idea their military had been planning such aggression. Ryan's team remained on station, no longer hiding but not quite celebrated either. The revelation of their 3-year infiltration had prevented a war, but it also terrified the Council. If humans could embed Special Forces operatives this deeply in their most secure facility, what did that say about security everywhere else? 3 days later, Corval found Ryan in the same corridor where they'd first truly spoken. The human was actually cleaning this time. No covert operations, no hidden agendas, just honestly mopping a floor that needed mopping. They're calling you a hero, Corval said as he approached. Some humans anyway. Others are calling you a vigilante who took too many risks. Ryan smiled slightly without looking up from his work. That sounds about right. What are they calling you? Traitor. Hero. Fool. Savior. Corval's 4 arms moved in a gesture of uncertainty. Depends who you ask. My family has disowned me. The Imperial Guard has formally discharged me. But the Council is offering me a position in their new military oversight division. Will you take it? I think so. Corval paused. Someone needs to make sure this never happens again. Someone who understands how easily good soldiers can follow bad orders. Ryan finally looked up, meeting the lieutenant's eyes. That's the hardest lesson to learn. I spent years after Redemption Point asking myself if I could have found another way. If all that killing was really necessary. Was it? At the time, yes. Your empire had us cornered. But that's what haunts me. How many times throughout history have people said, we had no choice, when maybe they just didn't look hard enough for alternatives? He gestured around the station. That's why I came back. To prove there's always another way if you're willing to work for it. You spent 3 years mopping floors, Corval said, still amazed by the dedication that required. 3 years of being invisible, being insulted, being treated like you didn't matter. How did you stand it? Ryan's expression grew distant. Every night I thought about Redemption Point, about walking through those ships full of dead Kryloth soldiers. Kids, most of them. Younger than you. They had pictures of families, letters from home, dreams about what they'd do after the war. And I'd killed them because that was my mission, my duty? He rolled up his sleeve, showing the tattoo in full detail. This mark? Everyone sees the black and thinks it represents death. But look closer. Corval stepped forward, examining the intricate patterns. Between the bold black lines were threads of deep crimson, woven throughout the design in complex patterns. The black marks are the ships I destroyed, the battles I won, Ryan explained quietly. But the red threads? Those are the lives I saved. Every enemy soldier we pulled from wreckage. Every civilian we evacuated. Every wounded warrior we treated instead of finishing off. At Redemption Point we killed thousands. But we saved tens of thousands more when we could have just killed everyone. His voice grew softer. That's what the siege breaker mark really means. Not just breaking sieges, breaking the cycle. Choosing mercy when revenge would be easier. Saving enemies when killing them would be safer. This tattoo reminds me every single day that real strength isn't about how much damage you can do. It's about how much damage you choose not to do. Corval looked at his own hands, thinking about the choice he'd made. Will you add something for this? For stopping the war? Already did. Ryan pointed to a new crimson thread woven into the pattern. This one represents every Kryloth whose life was saved when your fleets turned back. Including General Vex Thor. He'll stand trial, face justice, but he'll live. That's more mercy than he planned to show anyone. He doesn't deserve mercy. Probably not. But mercy isn't about what people deserve. It's about who we choose to be. Ryan picked up his mop again. Besides, keeping him alive sends a better message. It shows we're serious about peace, about justice systems and fair trials instead of just revenge. Over the following weeks, the station slowly returned to something like normal. New treaties were drafted. New security protocols were implemented. The human support staff were officially recognized as military personnel and given proper status. Though they remained on station, now serving openly as security consultants and peace monitors. Ryan could have left. His mission was complete, his team's cover blown. But he chose to stay at least for a while. There was work to be done, trust to rebuild, and somehow mopping floors while people learned who he really was felt like its own kind of statement. One evening, Ambassador Hayes found him cleaning the observation deck, the stars visible through the massive windows. "Captain Cooper," she said formally, "the Council would like to offer you a position. Official title, Special Advisor on Conflict Prevention. Generous salary, diplomatic status, an office with a view." Ryan kept cleaning. "Will I have to stop mopping floors?" Hayes laughed, surprised. "I suppose not? Though we could certainly hire someone else too." "I'll take the position," Ryan interrupted. "But I keep cleaning too. It reminds people what I'm willing to do to prevent war. Plus, you hear the best intelligence when people think you're not worth noticing. You know everyone notices you now, right? You're probably the most famous janitor in the galaxy. Give it time. People forget. They'll see the uniform and stop seeing the person again. That's human nature, ours and everyone else's." He paused in his work. "Besides, there's dignity in this. Honest work, making things clean, taking care of spaces where important things happen. I've been a soldier and I've been a janitor. I'm not sure the soldier version was any more honorable." Ace smiled. "The Council is also offering full pardons for your team. No charges for the infiltration. We don't need pardons for preventing genocide," Ryan said mildly. "But tell them thank you anyway." Months passed. The crisis faded into history, though its lessons remained. General Vex Thor stood trial and was sentenced to life imprisonment. The Kryloth Empire underwent political reforms, rooting out the military faction that had supported his plans. New treaties established oversight committees, early warning systems, and, ironically, a new position modeled after what Ryan had done: intelligence officers embedded in diplomatic stations, but now openly, legally, with full transparency. Corval thrived in his new role, building bridges between military forces that had nearly gone to war. He and Ryan met regularly, an unlikely friendship built on shared understanding of what they'd prevented. On the anniversary of the day the truth broke free, they stood together in the observation deck, watching stars that represented billions of lives still going about their business because two people had chosen truth over loyalty. "Do you think it'll last?" Corval asked. "The peace." Ryan shrugged. "Nothing lasts forever. Somewhere, someone is probably planning the next war right now. But we proved something important, that warriors can choose not to fight. That strength can mean restraint. That the hardest battles are the ones we prevent, not the ones we win." He looked down at his tattoo, at the network of black and crimson that covered his forearm. "More red than black now. Always more red than black." "My daughter asked me once what I did in the war," Ryan said quietly. "I told her I cleaned up messes before they got too big to fix. She thought I was joking. But it's the truth. That's all I've ever tried to do, clean up the mess we make of things and hope we learn to make less of it." Corval's four arms moved in a Kryloth gesture of deep respect. "Then you're the best janitor the galaxy has ever seen." Ryan smiled, picked up his mop and got back to work. Because floors always needed cleaning and someone had to do it. Someone had to care about the small things, the invisible work, the quiet prevention of disasters that never made headlines because they never happened. That was the real victory. Not glory, not recognition. Just another quiet day in a galaxy that kept turning because someone, somewhere, was willing to be invisible when it mattered most.